Hello, my name is Philip. I'm one of the co-owners and directors of Unique Senior Care. During this video I'm going to talk to you about the costings, pricing of living care and some of the things to think about in terms of minimum contract period, cooling off period and what else is included.
Hi, my name is Stacey. I am one of the client services managers here at Unique Senior Care. This is a video that we have put together to help you with some of the questions that you may have around living care costs.
For our living care services, we charge a daily rate of £255 for an individual. That's £1,785 per week. And for a couple, it's £320 a day, which makes the charge £2,240 a week.
Obviously far more cost effective if you're looking at residential care as an option. Living care will always be cheaper for two people than residential care for two people.
For respite, palliative or complex care, the charges are £300 per day for an individual person, making £2,100 per week, £355 per day for a couple, and that's £2,485 per week.
In the event of cooling off periods, naturally that's a legal requirement for us to provide a 14-day cooling off period from the date of signing the contract. That's not the start of the period of the service, but the date the contract is signed starts the clock on the cooling off period.
After the first 14 days has taken place, the cooling off period, we ask for written notice of 14 days cancellation. So once your care has started and you've gone into the 15th day, we just ask for that written notice to come in. Minimum period for living care is 1 week, and that's classed as our respite care. So respite care is anything from 1 week to 4 weeks.
Anything between 1 week and 4 weeks service is chargeable at the respite rate.
And following 4 weeks, it is classed as ongoing care.
Should you require ongoing living care, then we would expect that service to last for more than 4 weeks, and then that attracts the lower charge rate.
And that can be for as long as you need us to be there looking after you or your loved ones.
When it comes to planning for food, there are two options. One is to include the caregiver in the weekly food budget. The second option is to provide an allowance to the caregiver, which we recharge to the client of £40 a week.
We say that you could give the caregiver an allowance, which is £40 per week, and it equates to about £6 per day. And clients usually go for this option if they have specific meals that are delivered into them that are catered for them and there isn't any extra for the caregiver, so it's much easier for them to give the carer an allowance. The other option is to take the caregiver's meal requirements into account, so when you're doing your weekly shopping bill, everything can be all put together and there's no extra things to remember. If the carers are really lucky enough to be taken out on a day out with their clients, and for example they may like to go and visit a national trust or go to a garden centre to have a nice cup of tea and a delicious slice of cake, it would be down to the client.
Things like entry fees or coffees or car parking and any mileage charges. Not all of our caregivers drive, but in the event you're fortunate enough to have a caregiver that does have their own car, we charge a 50p per mile mileage allowance, which we actually pay to our care staff for the use of their vehicle.
If the carer doesn't drive, we tend to find that a lot of clients will book a taxi, or if they're able-bodied, some of them even like to get on the local buses and go out to places. So it'd be a case of the client would pay for the taxi or pay for the carers to get on the bus with them and go and visit whatever they love to go and visit.
We like to be completely transparent when it comes to costs, so there are no hidden charges.
I get questions quite often, are there VAT added to the invoice every month? The answer to that would be no. Other questions I also get are, do you charge for consultation fee? No, it's completely free of charge and no obligation. And thirdly, the final question that I always get asked, do we charge for setup fees? So, example, once the consultation has taken place, are there any further charges? The answer to that is no. Yes, so there are three ways in which clients can pay for their care. First and foremost, if they pay privately. Secondly, there is council funding. And thirdly, it would be NHS Continuing Healthcare.
This is a private pay service, but there are options for people to look for funding from other sources, typically the government. And we would always direct people to look at attendance allowance as an option, which is something that most people over a certain age will be entitled to, pretty much irrespective of their care requirements. So do look at attendance allowance, relatively straightforward to find, related to the social services department of your local authority, who have a responsibility to care for everyone that lives in the community. This comes into play when someone has a requirement for care at home, but it's based on two assessments. One, which is, does the person need help? And the second assessment is based on whether they can afford to pay for it themselves. That's classed as means testing. For an individual person, if they have savings of more than £23,250, they pay. If it's a couple, then naturally that amount is doubled to £46,500. So liquid assets, not including the value of their house, of more than £46,500 in the case of a couple, means that even local authority funded care is paid for by the individual. The third option is one which comes much later in the ageing process, which is something called NHS Continuing Healthcare. This is where the NHS step in and take over the responsibility for somebody's care at home. And that's when somebody's need changes from being a social care need to a medical need. And it's principally to keep people out of hospital. The NHS view a hospital bed as a cost, and naturally if somebody presents themselves at the accident and emergency department of their local hospital, the option of keeping them at home is much cheaper than allowing them to come into the hospital and swallow up another hospital bed. NHS Continuing Healthcare, or NHS what's called CHC funding, is actually quite complex to apply for. It's lots of form filling and box ticking. We'd always recommend that if you're applying for this yourself, to get some professional help, speak to your family solicitor or a local solicitor that has a care and welfare team. They'll be more than happy to help you with this process, and the likelihood of success when you use the help of a solicitor or a specialist is much greater than if you do it on your own. In this video, we've tried to answer all the questions we think you need to know the answers to. In the event you have further questions, please pick up the phone and give us a call. We understand this can be a stressful time for everyone. Arranging care is a big decision, and we need to make sure that you are armed with every piece of information you could possibly have to make sure you're making the best choice and the right choice for the person that needs the help and support.